Hello everyone, this is Mark in my blog about computers and technology and all that good stuff. It's Thursday the 20th of September 2012 and today I'd like to talk about bundling, specifically bundling operating systems with computers. Now, I've done a lot of research on this recently, and it used to be you'd get a whole bunch of different operating systems depending on which computer you bought. If you got an Amiga, you got Amiga DOS. If you bought an Atari ST, you got GEM. If you bought a Commodore 64, well, you would just get the basic ROM built in. And if you bought a Tandy, you might get Deskmate, which I believe just sits on top of DOS. So, whoops, let me correct that. And if you bought a Commodore PET in 1979, for example, it's the same thing. You get a basic ROM. That's what we had back then. And people didn't really think too much about it. If you got this computer, you got that operating system. It was all cut and dried. There was no choice really. Now, but later on, in 1982, we started to see hard drives appear, and they were very expensive. If anyone from that time period can remember, we started to see that near the end of 1981, and you were looking at thousands of dollars for your hard drive. Okay, but there's one type of bundling that I'm particularly interested in, and that is if you go into any computer store almost anywhere in the world, you're dealing with the consumer home market, you're dealing with Microsoft Windows, right? It's pretty hard to avoid. Now, if you're one of these clever people that can assemble your own computer, you can bypass that. You're immune to bundling. Doesn't really matter. You can go out, buy a motherboard, power supply, case, put it all together yourself, choose whatever you want: Haku, OpenBSD, Linux, etc., etc. And it's not a problem. But here's the interesting thing: just when did this bundling with Microsoft Windows start? Well, you probably can remember a time not that long ago where you'd buy a computer and you would get IBM DOS, or you would get Microsoft DOS, depending on which manufacturer. Now, if you bought a PC from Commodore, for example, most likely you'd be getting some version of MS-DOS, and that's all you got. They didn't even have the option of bundling with Windows. And unfortunately, they're gone now. They went bankrupt in 1994. So that is interesting. So when did the bundling with Microsoft Windows start, and how in the world did we end up with a situation where everybody was using it? Nobody diverges. No one seems to diverge from it. Now, Sun had their own thing, and DEC had their own thing, Digital Equipment Corporation. But these were very expensive workstations, and SGI had their own thing. They had something called IRIX, or whatever. I don't know if they used the acronym or if they pronounced it differently. And those were all really expensive workstations. You could drop 5,000, 6,000, or even more than that. And it was out of the budget of the average person. And there was we had OSF Motif with Dell's. You go out, you could buy their top of the line Dell System 325, like a 386, 25 megahertz, and you'd have a type of Unix on there running a windowing system. Of course, you're looking at a lot of money again. Okay, so what happened outside of these expensive workstations? The consumer market was all Microsoft Windows, and so curious person that I am, I wanted to go back and see when did this start. So I went through Google Groups and I tried to find information on when did the Microsoft Windows thing start to become preloaded. So you'd actually buy the computer and you get Microsoft Windows on your hard drive. And I suppose there was the choice where you could just say, oh no, I don't want Windows, it's too slow or whatever, just give me MS-DOS. But I mean, it's still a Microsoft product. And so your only alternative, and of course you could have bought an Amiga back in 1985, and you'd have this windowing system, and you'd have the proprietary operating system of Amiga-DOS. So either way, it was proprietary. I mean, you had proprietary Unix, you had proprietary Microsoft Windows, you had proprietary MS-DOS, you had proprietary Amiga-DOS, etc., etc. That didn't change until later, a lot later, as it turned out. The only people that really had the non-proprietary stuff were in Bell Labs. They had Unix version 7. Okay, that's going all the way back to 1979. So they did have it, and they were running on PDP-11, and they had software freedom. Everybody was sharing everything. It was incredible. So, getting back to the pre-bundling with Windows. When did it start? Okay, so we do the research, and we found that on May the 22nd, 1990, Microsoft Windows 3.0 was released. And then soon after that, Gateway 2000 started bundling with here's your Gateway computer, here's your Windows 3.0 built onto it. And I really don't know if you had much choice in the matter. I assume that if you didn't have Windows, you just had DOS on its own. But remember, when we had Windows 3.0, that just sat on top of the DOS. It was kind of like an add-on to it. And that didn't change until later. And then a little further on, we can see in May 1992, Gateway bundles Windows 3.1. 1993, Radio Shack is introducing Windows to their PCs. Okay. And then in 1995, Radio Shack starts to sell AST brand computers, and then eventually AST themselves bowed out of the market. So that's where we are now. Now, I know we've got Android and we got tablets, but you know, from my point of view, I sympathize with people that like tablets. You know, you can go out to your backyard and you can just sit outside in the fresh air, and you can use your touch screen and your pinch zoom and all that stuff, and on the surface of it, it seems like it's a good thing. You got your Android, which is a Unix derivative. You got choices. You have more choices than before, and it's true. You do have those choices. But I'm looking at things from a programmer's perspective. I'm not going to sit down and I'm not going to program on a tablet for a tablet. There's just no way. I'm going to use another computer to do that, or I'm not going to touch tablet, or possibly not even touch tablets at all. But that, looking back on it now, that's what we had. And Microsoft really is got to the point now where they're kind of no longer required. We don't need Microsoft. We have a whole bunch of other things that I've talked about at length before, but I just wanted to get back to when it all started with the bundling, and it seems like the preloading started in Windows 3.0 back in 1990. So, and it just kept becoming, it just crept up on everybody, and you know, Commodore went bankrupt in 1994, and a lot of the other guys dropped out too. Atari doesn't make computers, haven't made computers for a long time, and we don't have Radio Shack in Canada anymore, so that's gone too. And of course, the Tandys are long gone, so that diversity in the marketplace is gone. So what we have now is we have people that are proficient with alternative operating systems, and mostly by that I mean Linux and BSD, and I'll say GNU Linux, you know, because I do use the GNU utilities. I'm using Vector Linux. So this is where we are today. This is 2012, and so we have a lot of the choice back again. We're actually in a better situation now than we've ever been. There's tons of used computers, very, very cheap, floating around. Commodity-based PCs that we can fix and repair indefinitely. The parts aren't going to run out. So we're actually in a good situation. I'm actually in a positive mindset these days. It's just like if you go back a little bit further, basically what the magazines and the computer software sellers were doing in 1988, for example, they were selling something called Windows 286 and Windows 386, and they were selling it for about $67. So I guess the price hasn't really changed that much, and that's 1988, right? That's quite some time ago, well over 20 years ago. So I actually tested, even before there was Windows 286, there was something called Windows 2 and Windows 1. And I actually tested Windows 2 back in the day, and I thought it was really slow. And that's what a lot of people were saying back then. Now, computers have gotten a lot faster since then, and we have a lot more choice. I mean, I think it's absolutely mind-boggling that we have what we've got today. And people don't really appreciate it, or they don't know, right? Because now computers have become used by almost everybody in North America and Europe, and I'm sure in other parts of the world as well, pretty much the whole world. And that's what we have now. But it's important to remember how this crept up on us, how we got to this position. And it was with the pre-bundling and the preloading. Now, before computers had hard drives, you would say, okay, here's your computer, and here's your 5 1/4 inch discs, and you would go and you would just load whatever that came with your computer. There was no preloading. You had to boot off of a floppy disk because there was no hard drive in your computer. Now, things have changed a lot from those days, but unfortunately we do have this one drawback with computers now, and that is that it's very hard to avoid for people that are just walking into computer stores. You know, there's a few independent guys that are actually will do what, you know, we're independent, we'll just put whatever you want on your computer, right? But the people that really know what they want, they can do it themselves. They don't have to go into a computer store. So it becomes it's not as critical. But for the average person, it is, because they don't know all of the different choices. It becomes this opaque block, this magic box that hopefully does what you want. And you know, if you need help, then you're going to have to pay somebody to help you, and you're not going to appreciate all of this open source software, because you don't know how to program, and so you're going to look at things from a completely different perspective. So anyway, that's mainly what I wanted to say, and I just wanted to rehash that chronology of what happened with the commodity PCs, and of course, if we look at the history of the IBM PC, we've got just bear with me for a second. I just want to get the date for that. Okay, so scroll down. Okay, so we were talking about the IBM PC, the 5150, and that came with 256K RAM, and I didn't have a hard drive. So that was the beginning of the what we call PCs. Now, some people might argue that term. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to say the other point of view was there were personal computers before the IBM 5150, and that's true. And then they can argue about whether they were really PCs or did IBM come up with that term. The common usage is the PC started with IBM 5150. So that's all for now, and thanks for listening.